Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I stand before you as someone who some of you may regard as a member of the old media, a dinosaur, the modern-day coal miner. For I'm a journalist, a print journalist no less, something I've been for nearly 30 years. And if you listen to some commentators, mainly in the digital sphere of course, I'm one of the remnants of a bygone era, because newspapers are dead, aren't they? Or are they? Well, let me tell you why I think they aren't, and why, as a result, I think we will still have an important role to play for many years to come to ensure those printing presses do keep running. First, locally. My job is to the editor of 3 weekly newspapers here in Bath and Somerset, and between them they sell around 30,000 copies a week and are therefore read by 90,000 people. That's a lot of people, and a lot of people who are actively paying for editorial content. And that's important because journalism, be it national, local or international, isn't cheap, and thankfully there are still people who realise that and are still prepared to pay for what they read. And let me tell you a few other facts about the printing press, facts that maybe show that we're not quite ready for the knackers yard just yet. I'll start with my passion, local newspapers. There are currently 1,100 regional and local newspapers in the UK with 1,600 associated websites. The local press is the UK's most popular and indeed trusted medium. It has read by 33 million people a week. 42 million unique users rely on their local newspaper websites every month. And of course, they are reading the words of print journalists because without the print, we wouldn't be able to afford to run those sites. Over 60% of people, when asked, say they act on the advertisements in local newspapers. How many digital platforms can boast that sort of response? And, even in a time of supposed crisis, the local media still employs over 30,000 people, including 10,000 journalists. Finally, in this bitch, from more than 6,100 local newspapers are sold or distributed in the UK every single minute. Bear in mind, all those figures which come from the newspaper site's website are at a time when many people would have you believe our industry is in its death throes. So that's the local press. What about the national one? Well, in a dying industry, it would be pretty pointless to launch a brand new product, wasn't it? So, when the news of the world died last year, you would imagine, like the dead parrot, it would stay dead. But its readers would migrate elsewhere, some would go to the web, or the others would just wait for all the other newspapers to follow it into oblivion. But hark, what is that I hear? A new paper, The Sun on Sunday, was launched to fill the gap and is now selling 2.5 million copies a week out of a Sunday market that still generates 6 million sales. When was the last time a new product was launched into a supposedly deathbed industry and found 2.5 million customers overnight? And what of international? Well, according to the World Press Trends Report for 2010, the figures show that amongst the 69 countries which account for 90% of the global newspaper industry, daily newspaper circulation has barely declined and stands at 520 million copies a day. Yes, 520 million copies a day, and that doesn't even include the sale of weekly titles. The report said newspapers continue to reach a large daily audience of around 2.3 billion people, 20% higher than the 1.9 million reached by the internet. And to all those who say papers are just for older people, the report showed a large increase in the reach of 15 to 24-year-olds in Europe thanks to well-targeted free titles such as the Metro. So, is it a case of crisis? What crisis? Well, not quite. The Bath Chronicle recently celebrated its 250th anniversary, but the only reason we've survived this long is because we've been prepared to change and innovate, and that is what we must continue to do in a rapidly changing media environment. That is the only way we're going to ensure we have a good future to match our great past. The biggest innovation we did, for example, at the Chronicle happened 4 years ago, when we became the first newspaper in Britain, possibly Europe, to convert from being a daily title into a weekly one. We did so because we saw that the market was changing, and we felt that rather than having a struggling daily title, our community would be better served by having a big, bold, strident weekly. The result is we now have a multi-award-winning paper that sells far more copies per edition than we ever managed as a daily, and it's far more of a commercial success. Other papers around the UK are copying us as well, and it is such innovations that will help us keep the printing presses rolling. But of course, we accept that print is not enough, and that is why our presence on the web and in social media is vital to our operation. Our website isn't our enemy, it's our partner and our friend, and we now actively serve 3 audiences A print-only one, a web-only one, and the many people who use both areas for different reasons. But, and this is so important, it is the print model that funds our web operation. Show me a news-gathering organisation that is solely funding a large journalistic operation via its digital income alone, and then show the rest of our industry, because none of us can find one. It is very hard to monetise news content online. The reason I think that newspapers will continue is because I still think they offer something that the mediums don't. The argument goes that we don't need newspapers anymore because we're all journalists, because we can all be bloggers and we can all share our information. And of course, to some extent, that is true. But answer me this. How many bloggers are currently embedded with the troops in countries such as Afghanistan or in Iraq, or are on the front line risking and sometimes losing their lives in countries such as Syria? There are national newspaper journalists doing all of that as we speak and sending back reports that we need to see thanks to the resources that the newspaper provided for them. And talking of information, can you imagine a blogger doing what the Daily Telegraph did 3 years ago and shifting through 1 million pieces of paper to expose all the details of the MP's expenses scandal? The Daily Telegraph took on the might of the judiciary, Parliament and all of the main political parties to expose what was rotten at the heart of Westminster. Without newspapers, would we have found that out? Or even well before that, would we have known about Watergate? Of course, you can of course point to WikiLeaks, which has done some great work, but the problem with sites like that is they very often put material out without any semblance of context or sensitivity, which despite all their many faults, newspapers do their best to avoid. So, I stand here before you as someone who believes in digital, loves the web, but still feels that the diversity and entertainment value of the printed newspaper means it has a part today, tomorrow and always. The new industry, the newspaper industry may need to get smaller, it may need to do some innovations as we've done, but I think it will survive. And if you don't believe that, remember the figure of 520 million sales per day and the fact that on Thursday, 90,000 people will happily be reading the stuff that my guys are writing now, probably not now. So, in conclusion, we're not dead yet, we're not even dying. And for that reason, if you do own a printed press, I wouldn't advertise it for sale just yet. If you do, advertise it in the newspaper because you get a better response.